What if the most powerful tools for psychological transformation weren't created by modern science at all, but were encoded thousands of years ago in ancient wisdom that's been hidden in plain sight? Today, we journey beyond the veil to discover how the 7 Hermetic principles, ancient keys to understanding reality itself, can unlock unprecedented depths of psychological healing and personal evolution that modern therapy barely touches. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the most profound answers to our modern psychological struggles come not from the latest research papers or therapeutic techniques, but from wisdom so ancient it feels as though it speaks directly to the soul? There's a reason for this paradox, a hidden connection between the fabric of your mind and the cosmic order that the ancient sages understood all too well. I invite you, not as a casual viewer, but as a fellow traveler on the path of awakening, to step with me through a doorway that few in our modern world even know exists. The Hermetic tradition, preserved through millennia by mystery schools and passed down through initiates, contains a set of principles so profound that when properly understood, they don't just describe reality, they provide the very framework for transforming it, beginning with your own consciousness. What I'm about to share isn't just information. It's a transmission of knowledge that has the potential to fundamentally alter how you understand yourself and your place in the cosmos. The 7 Hermetic principles from the legendary Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus aren't just philosophical concepts, they are living keys that, when applied with intention, unlock chambers of your psyche that modern psychology has only begun to glimpse. In the next 30 minutes, I will guide you through an exploration of how these 7 Hermetic keys can be applied as powerful tools for psychological transformation. But understand this, what you're about to receive isn't merely another self-help approach. This is ancient wisdom that speaks to the very architecture of reality, offering insights that transcend the typical boundaries between the spiritual and psychological realms. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without, isn't just a poetic phrase, it's a profound recognition of correspondence that explains why internal psychological work creates external change. This principle reveals why shadow integration is so powerful, why thought patterns shape your reality, and how the vibrational nature of consciousness determines what manifests in your life. What the ancient Hermeticists understood, and what modern psychology is only now rediscovering, is that consciousness itself is the primary substance of reality. When we work with these principles, we aren't just changing our thoughts, we're realigning our entire being with the fundamental laws that govern existence itself. The promise before you is this: through understanding and applying these 7 ancient keys, you can unlock a level of psychological transformation that goes beyond symptom management or behavioral modification. You can fundamentally transmute the very substance of your being, turning the lead of limiting beliefs, emotional wounds, and unconscious patterns into the gold of expanded awareness, authentic power, and profound inner peace. Our exploration today will guide you through each of the 7 Hermetic principles, unveiling their psychological applications and providing practical techniques for applying them in your own inner work. We'll move from understanding the mental nature of the universe to exploring how polarity and rhythm shape our emotional experiences, and finally to how causality and gender can be leveraged for genuine transformation. Along this journey, you'll discover how the principle of mentalism connects to modern understanding of cognitive restructuring and the creation of your psychological reality, why correspondence explains the power of shadow work and provides a framework for healing at multiple levels simultaneously, how vibration helps us understand emotional states as frequencies that can be intentionally shifted, The way polarity reveals the hidden unity behind psychological opposites and offers a path to transcending inner conflict. How rhythm governs the natural cycles of psychological growth and can be harnessed rather than resisted. Why understanding cause and effect liberates us from victim consciousness and empowers genuine change. How gender, as a universal principle of creation, provides a template for psychological wholeness and creative manifestation. For each principle, I'll offer not just philosophical understanding, but concrete visualization practices and integration techniques that you can begin applying immediately in your own psychological journey. To truly grasp the transformative power of these principles, we must first understand their origins. The Hermetic tradition is named after the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus, considered by many scholars to be a syncretic combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, both deities of wisdom, writing, and magic. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to this figure, contains the essence of Hermetic philosophy distilled into profound axioms. The phrase, "as above, so below," from this tablet has become one of the most recognized Hermetic maxims, embodying the principle of correspondence that reveals the interconnectedness between different planes of existence. This principle suggests that patterns observed in one domain mirror those in another, creating a harmony spanning both cosmos and consciousness. These teachings were preserved through the ages in mystery schools across Egypt, Greece, and later Europe, influencing traditions from Neoplatonism and Gnosticism to Jewish Kabbalah and Muslim Sufism. The Renaissance saw a revival of interest in Hermetic wisdom, with alchemists and philosophers studying these principles as guides to both spiritual and material transformation. In 1908, the Kybalion was published, offering a modern interpretation of these ancient teachings through 7 fundamental principles. This text became a significant source for understanding Hermetic thinking and has guided many seekers of esoteric knowledge. What makes these principles so remarkable is not just their antiquity, but their perennial relevance. The same wisdom that guided alchemists in their laboratories now offers profound insights for our psychological understanding. Carl Jung himself was deeply influenced by Hermetic philosophy, particularly in his concepts of the collective unconscious and the individuation process. The universal appeal of Hermetic wisdom comes from its ability to transcend dogma while embracing direct experiential knowledge of divine principles, what the ancients called gnosis. These aren't simply beliefs to be accepted, but truths to be experienced directly through one's own consciousness. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This first Hermetic principle establishes the foundation for all psychological work by recognizing that consciousness is primary. Rather than being a byproduct of physical processes, mind is understood as the fundamental reality from which all else emerges. In practical psychological terms, this principle aligns perfectly with cognitive restructuring, which recognizes that our thoughts shape our emotional and behavioral reality. When you change your thoughts, you change your experience, not because you're ignoring reality, but because you're working with the mental substance from which reality is constructed. Close your eyes and imagine entering a vast laboratory of mind. See yourself standing before a workbench where your thoughts take form as tangible substances. Notice how different qualities of thoughts create different energetic patterns. Observe how limiting beliefs appear dense and heavy, while expansive thoughts shimmer with light and possibility. Now, consciously select one persistent negative thought pattern you wish to transform. See it clearly before you as a substance that can be worked with. Using your imagination as an alchemical tool, visualize this thought being dissolved, reformed, and transmuted into a more empowering pattern. Feel this new thought pattern integrating into your consciousness, creating new neural pathways and possibilities. This practice isn't mere fantasy. It's working directly with the mental substance of your reality, engaging the principle that the universe is fundamentally mental in nature. Modern neuroscience confirms that mental rehearsal creates real changes in neural architecture. As above, so below. As below, so above. This principle reveals that patterns repeat across different scales and planes of existence. The macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm, creating a framework for understanding how inner psychological work manifests in outer reality. This principle provides the theoretical foundation for shadow integration work. When Jung noted that, whatever qualities a man does not recognize in himself, shadow, anima, whatever, will confront him in real life. He was essentially restating the Hermetic principle of correspondence. The outer world becomes a mirror for what remains unconscious within us. For 1 week, approach every triggering interaction as a mirror reflecting something within your own psyche. When someone irritates you deeply, ask, what aspect of myself might this person be reflecting that I haven't fully acknowledged? Record your observations in a journal, noting patterns that emerge. This isn't about blaming yourself for others' behaviors, but about recognizing the profound correspondence between your inner landscape and your outer experiences. This practice transforms relationships from sources of frustration into opportunities for profound self-knowledge. As you integrate previously unconscious aspects of yourself, you'll notice your external reality shifting in response, not through magical thinking, but through the natural operation of the principle of correspondence. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This principle recognizes that all things exist as vibrational states along a continuum, from the densest matter to the most subtle thoughts. In psychological terms, this explains how emotions and mental states operate as frequencies that can be intentionally shifted. This vibrational understanding aligns with transpersonal psychology's recognition that consciousness exists on multiple levels or states, each with its own characteristics and qualities. By consciously working with vibration, we can access expanded states of awareness beyond our ordinary experience. Begin by becoming aware of your current emotional frequency. Without judgment, simply notice the quality of energy moving through your body and mind. Is it heavy or light? Contracted or expansive? Turbulent or peaceful? Now, bring to mind a higher emotional state you wish to embody. Perhaps joy, peace, or compassionate strength. Rather than forcing the state, tune into its unique vibrational signature, like finding a radio frequency. Feel the subtle resonance of this emotion in your body. Gradually allow your awareness to align with this frequency, letting go of resistance. Just as a tuning fork causes another to vibrate at the same frequency when brought near it, your consciousness naturally attunes to the vibrational states you hold in sustained awareness. Practice this daily, recognizing that you're not just changing thoughts, but actually shifting the vibrational frequency of your consciousness in ways that affect your entire being. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This principle reveals that apparent opposites are actually extremes of the same thing, differing only in degree. Psychologically, this explains how emotional and mental states that seem opposed, like love and hate, are actually points on a single spectrum. Understanding this allows for the transmutation of negative states into positive ones by shifting gradually along the spectrum rather than trying to leap from one pole to its opposite. This principle aligns perfectly with cognitive restructuring techniques, which recognize that thoughts exist on continuums rather than absolutes. By recognizing the unity behind apparent opposites, we can dissolve black and white thinking and access more nuanced, reality-based perspectives. Identify an emotional or psychological polarity that causes you struggle. Perhaps confidence and insecurity, attachment and detachment, or certainty and uncertainty. Visualize this polarity as a spectrum of light, with one extreme as red and the opposite as violet. See how these colors blend into a complete rainbow in between, revealing that the seeming opposites are actually connected through gradual shifts. Now imagine yourself having the freedom to move anywhere along this spectrum, rather than being stuck at one extreme. Feel how this movement represents psychological flexibility rather than rigidity. This practice transforms rigid either-or thinking into a more fluid understanding that embraces the full spectrum of human experience. Everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle acknowledges that all things move in cycles, including our psychological states. Rather than fighting these natural rhythms, we can learn to work with them, understanding that periods of growth are often followed by integration, and challenges eventually yield to ease. Psychologically, this explains why progress isn't linear and helps us navigate the inevitable ebbs and flows of mental and emotional states without becoming discouraged. By recognizing these rhythms, we can develop greater patience and trust in the process of transformation. For 1 month, keep a daily record of your psychological states, noting energy levels, emotional tone, and mental clarity. Look for patterns in these cycles, perhaps weekly rhythms tied to work schedules, monthly patterns connected to biological cycles, or seasonal shifts in mood and motivation. Once you've identified your natural rhythms, work with them rather than against them. Plan demanding activities during high-energy periods and reflective or restorative practices during natural ebbs. This isn't about surrendering to limitations, but about strategically using natural cycles to your advantage. The wisdom of rhythm teaches us that the pendulum always swings, but its anchor point, the center from which it swings, remains stable. By identifying with this center rather than with the extremes, you can maintain equilibrium amid life's inevitable fluctuations. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. This principle establishes that nothing happens by chance, and that all events follow lawful patterns, even when those patterns aren't immediately apparent. Psychologically, this principle liberates us from victim consciousness by revealing that we participate in creating our experiences through our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. By understanding the causal chains operating in our lives, we gain the power to initiate new causes that will produce different effects. This principle doesn't blame people for circumstances beyond their control, but it does recognize our agency in responding to those circumstances in ways that either perpetuate or transform them. Select a recurring pattern in your life that you wish to change. On paper, trace this pattern backward through the chain of causes and effects that produce it. Begin with the immediate causes, actions, choices, responses, and work back to more subtle causes, beliefs, expectations, unconscious patterns. Once you've mapped this causal chain, identify points where you can intervene to create different outcomes. These intervention points are your leverage for change. Rather than trying to change the end result directly, focus on initiating new causes that will naturally produce different effects. For example, if you struggle with abandonment in relationships, you might trace the chain back through your behaviors, the partners you choose, your expectations, and ultimately to core beliefs formed in early experiences. By changing these causal factors, rather than just trying not to be abandoned, you create lasting transformation. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle recognizes that creative processes require the interaction of complementary energies, traditionally described as masculine, active, projective, and feminine, receptive, nurturing. Psychologically, this explains the importance of integrating different aspects of consciousness for wholeness. Jung's concepts of anima and animus, the contrasexual archetypes within the psyche, directly parallel this Hermetic understanding. True psychological health comes from honoring and integrating both the active and receptive aspects of consciousness, rather than over-identifying with one at the expense of the other. Begin by identifying which gender principle you tend to overemphasize in your approach to psychological growth. Do you primarily focus on active doing, analyzing, and controlling, masculine principle? Or do you emphasize receiving, nurturing, and allowing, feminine principle? Create a daily practice that intentionally cultivates the complementary energy. If you're predominantly in masculine mode, practice receptive meditation, intuitive listening, and allowing change to unfold organically. If you're predominantly in feminine mode, practice setting clear intentions, establishing boundaries, and taking decisive action. This balance creates psychological wholeness and enhances creative manifestation by engaging the full spectrum of your consciousness. In our modern world, psychology often stops at the boundaries of the individual mind. But Hermetic wisdom, like transpersonal psychology, recognizes that consciousness extends far beyond personal identity into collective and cosmic dimensions. The 7 Hermetic principles don't just apply to individual healing. They provide a framework for understanding collective transformation and our participation in larger fields of consciousness. As we align our individual minds with these universal principles, we become conscious agents in the evolution of consciousness itself. This perspective transforms psychological work from mere self-improvement into sacred participation with cosmic processes. We recognize that personal healing contributes to collective healing through the principle of correspondence, and that our individual vibration affects the greater field through sympathetic resonance. The ultimate goal of Hermetic psychology isn't just the healthy functioning of the ego, but what the ancients called the great work. The soul's reunion with its divine source through a progressive awakening. This alchemical process transforms not just specific issues, but our fundamental relationship with existence. As we conclude our exploration of these 7 ancient keys to psychological transformation, I invite you to recognize that this is not merely information to be understood intellectually, but wisdom to be embodied through practice. The Hermetic path has always been experiential, focusing on direct realization rather than secondhand knowledge. Begin by choosing one principle that resonates most strongly with your current life situation. Work with the corresponding practice daily for at least 1 lunar cycle, noting how your consciousness shifts in response. Then gradually incorporate the other principles, building a comprehensive practice of Hermetic psychology. Remember that you're not just working with modern concepts, but engaging with an ageless tradition that has guided seekers for millennia. As you apply these principles, you join a lineage of those who have used this wisdom to transform lead into gold, both metaphorically in the laboratory of consciousness and literally in the quality of their lived experience. For those who wish to continue this exploration, I invite you to join our community of modern mystics as we journey beyond the veil together. Share your insights and experiences in the comments below, and subscribe to join us next week as we explore the hidden connections between quantum physics and Hermetic principles. Until then, remember the words inscribed on the Emerald Tablet: true without falsehood, certain and most true. May your inner work be guided by this same clarity and truth. Before we journey into the profound depths of sacred geometry, consider this. The same geometric patterns that form the spiral of a galaxy are mirrored in the unfurling of a fern, the chambers of a nautilus shell, and perhaps most remarkably, within the structure of human consciousness itself. What you're about to discover is not merely intellectual knowledge, but a remembering of the universal language that has been hiding in plain sight all along. Have you ever wondered why certain patterns and shapes seem to resonate with something deep within your soul? What if the ancient alchemists weren't merely creating beautiful art when they carved intricate geometric designs into temple walls, but were actually encoding a sophisticated language of consciousness that modern science is only beginning to decipher? The sacred geometries that have adorned the most revered spiritual sites across civilizations aren't simply decorative elements. They are keys that unlock doorways to altered states of awareness that have been accessible to initiates throughout the ages. Today, we stand at the threshold of rediscovering this forgotten language that bridges the material and the divine. My fellow travelers on this path of awakening, I invite you to join me on an extraordinary journey, one that will take us from the microscopic patterns of your own DNA to the vast architectural blueprints of the cosmos. As someone who has spent decades studying both the scientific and mystical dimensions of sacred geometry, I can assure you that what lies ahead has the potential to fundamentally transform how you perceive reality itself. The geometric codes we'll explore together aren't merely abstract concepts. They are living forces that have shaped human consciousness since time immemorial. The ancients knew what quantum physicists are now confirming. The geometry is not just descriptive of reality, but generative of it. In these next 30 minutes, prepare to witness the veil between worlds grow thin as we decode the geometric patterns that form the very architecture of consciousness. Some of what I'll share has been hidden within mystery schools for centuries, while other revelations have emerged from cutting-edge research at the intersection of neuroscience and sacred mathematics. Our exploration will unfold along several fascinating pathways. First, we'll uncover the ancient origins of sacred geometry, tracing its presence in Egyptian temples, Greek philosophy, Hindu mandalas, and beyond. You'll discover how civilizations separated by vast distances and time somehow arrived at identical geometric understandings. We'll then venture into the first revelation, how these same patterns manifest throughout the natural world, from the spiral growth patterns of plants to the orbital mechanics of planets. More importantly, we'll examine how these patterns relate to the functioning of human consciousness and the structure of our nervous system. As we delve deeper into the mystery, we'll explore the fractal and holographic nature of awareness itself, examining groundbreaking research suggesting that our consciousness operates according to the same geometric principles that govern the cosmos. This isn't mere coincidence. It points to a profound interconnection between mind and universe that the ancients intuited through direct experience. Finally, we'll explore practical ways to work with sacred geometry in your own spiritual practice, from meditation techniques to environmental design that can help align your awareness with these fundamental patterns of creation. By the end of our journey, you'll possess both the conceptual understanding and practical tools to begin working directly with the geometric language of consciousness. The story of sacred geometry begins long before written history, etched into megalithic structures and cave paintings that still puzzle archaeologists today. But it's in ancient Egypt where we find some of the most sophisticated applications of these universal patterns. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, embodies the golden ratio, nasa phi. In its proportions, the same mathematical constant found throughout nature, from the spiral of galaxies to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. This divine proportion, approximately 1.618, creates forms that are inherently pleasing to human perception because they reflect the very patterns from which our consciousness emerged. In the temples of Karnak and Luxor, the ancient Egyptians weren't merely creating aesthetically pleasing architecture. They were constructing energetic machines' physical structures designed according to precise geometric principles to facilitate specific states of consciousness. The avenue of sphinxes, with its perfect alignment and spacing, wasn't simply impressive urban planning. It was designed to gradually shift the initiate's awareness as they approached the inner sanctum. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, Pythagoras and Plato were formalizing the study of sacred geometry in Greece. Plato identified the 5 regular polyhedra tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron, which he associated with the classical elements of fire, earth, air, water, and ether, or universe. These Platonic solids represent perfect geometric forms where all faces, edges, and angles are identical. To Plato, they weren't merely mathematical curiosities, but the fundamental building blocks of physical reality. In India, we find perhaps the most sophisticated system for mapping consciousness through geometry in the form of yantras, geometric diagrams used as meditation tools. The Sri Yantra, consisting of 9 interlocking triangles surrounded by lotus petals and enclosing circles, represents the systematic unfolding of consciousness from unity, the central bindu point, to multiplicity. Each of these traditions recognized something profound: that certain geometric patterns serve as bridges between dimensions of reality, between the seen and unseen, the material and the spiritual, the finite and the infinite. These weren't arbitrary designs, but precise tools for expanding and transforming consciousness. The first great revelation of sacred geometry is that the same patterns governing cosmic structures also orchestrate the dynamics of consciousness itself. This becomes evident when we examine the golden ratio and the closely related Fibonacci sequence in detail. The Fibonacci sequence 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 reveals a profound mathematical truth. Each number is the sum of the 2 preceding it. What's remarkable is that the ratio between consecutive Fibonacci numbers progressively approximates phi, the golden ratio. This sequence appears with uncanny frequency throughout nature, in the branching patterns of trees, the arrangement of leaves on stems, the spiraling of galaxies, and even in the proportions of the human body. But these patterns extend beyond the visible realm into the architecture of consciousness itself. Research into neural networks reveals that our brain structures follow fractal scaling patterns, the same self-similar geometric organization found throughout nature. As neuroscientist Dr. Anirban Bandyopadhyay suggests, there may be a universal geometric language underlying both physical reality and conscious experience. The implications are profound. The geometric patterns we observe in nature aren't merely coincidental. They represent the fundamental algorithms through which consciousness itself structures experience. When we examine the microtubules within neurons, we discover that these tiny protein structures, which some theories identify as the seat of quantum effects in consciousness, organize themselves according to the same geometric principles that govern cosmic structures. Even more fascinating is how exposure to specific geometric forms appears to influence cognitive function. Research suggests that certain shapes can enhance memory, attention, and creativity, as if these forms resonate with the inherent structure of awareness itself. This isn't surprising when we consider that our visual cortex is specifically attuned to recognize patterns and symmetries that reflect the underlying geometry of reality. What emerges is a profound understanding Consciousness isn't contained within the brain. It's a field phenomenon that follows the same geometric organizing principles evident throughout the cosmos. The ancient wisdom that, as above, so below, isn't merely poetic metaphor, but a precise description of how reality is structured across scales. As we venture deeper into the mystery, we encounter perhaps the most radical insight. Consciousness itself appears to be fractal in nature. A fractal, as you may know, is a pattern that repeats itself at different scales, creating infinite complexity from simple iterative rules. The branching pattern of a tree, for instance, repeats the same geometric relationship from trunk to tiniest twig. What's revolutionary about this understanding is that it applies not just to physical structures, but to consciousness itself. When researchers study brain activity patterns, they discover fractal scaling. The same patterns of electrical activity appear at multiple time scales, from milliseconds to hours. This suggests that consciousness doesn't operate linearly, but holographically, with each part containing information about the whole. The Sri Yantra, that ancient geometric meditation tool, demonstrates this principle perfectly. Its 9 interlocking triangles create 43 smaller triangles, each representing a specific aspect of consciousness. From the outermost level, Upara, representing the earth plane, to the innermost Bindu point, Sarva Anandamaya, representing pure consciousness and infinite bliss. The Sri Yantra maps the systematic unfoldment of awareness from unity to multiplicity and back again. What the ancients intuited through direct experience, modern science is now confirming through detailed analysis of neural networks. The central nervous system that governs our body and mind is fractally organized both in structure and function. This isn't mere coincidence, but suggests that fractal geometry may be the fundamental language through which consciousness expresses itself across all scales of existence. Perhaps most intriguing is the relationship between entropy, fractals, and consciousness. Researchers have noted that consciousness corresponds with increased entropy in brain activity, and fractals are highly entropic structures. When we enter expanded states of awareness during meditation, brain activity shows increased fractal scaling, as if consciousness is blooming into more complex geometric arrangements. The mystics have always known this. When they speak of the 1,000-petaled lotus of enlightened awareness, or describe consciousness expanding in geometric patterns during profound spiritual experiences, they aren't speaking metaphorically, they're describing the actual geometry of awakened consciousness. Understanding sacred geometry isn't merely an intellectual exercise. It offers practical pathways for transforming your experience of reality. By consciously working with these patterns, you can begin to align your awareness with the fundamental structures of creation. One of the most accessible ways to work with sacred geometry is through visualization meditation. Try this. Close your eyes and imagine a perfect sphere of golden light at your heart center. Feel its perfect symmetry and completeness. Now, visualize this sphere expanding to encompass your entire body. Notice how this simple geometric contemplation naturally quiets the mind and centers awareness in the present moment. For a more advanced practice, work with the Platonic solids as meditation objects. Begin with a tetrahedron, 4 triangular faces. Visualize it as a perfect form of fire energy at your navel center, rotating slowly. As you breathe with this image, you may notice how it naturally organizes and stabilizes your energy field. Beyond formal meditation, you can integrate sacred geometric awareness into your living environment. The spaces we inhabit profoundly influence our consciousness. Consider how cathedrals, with their soaring arches and geometric precision, naturally evoke a sense of transcendence. You can create similar effects in your own home by incorporating sacred geometric patterns in your decor. From artwork featuring the flower of life to furniture arrangements that reflect harmonic proportions. Even more directly, you can learn to recognize these patterns in nature. During your next walk outdoors, notice the Fibonacci spirals in ferns and pine cones, the hexagonal patterns of snowflakes, the branching fractals of trees. This isn't mere observation, it's a form of communion with a geometric intelligence that structures reality itself. Perhaps most powerful is the practice of sacred movement based on geometric patterns. Ancient traditions like sacred dance often incorporated precise geometric pathways that participants would trace with their bodies. These weren't arbitrary choreographies, but technologies for aligning human awareness with cosmic patterns. Even simple practices like walking a labyrinth itself, a sacred geometric form, can induce profound shifts in consciousness. By working consciously with sacred geometry, you're not merely appreciating beautiful patterns, you're actively participating in the same creative process through which consciousness structures reality across all scales of existence. This isn't metaphysical speculation, but a practical technology for expanding awareness that has been refined across millennia. As we approach the culmination of our journey, a transcendent perspective emerges. Sacred geometry isn't merely a subject of study, it's the fundamental language through which consciousness communicates with itself across all dimensions of existence. What the mystics discovered through direct experience and what scientists are now confirming through rigorous observation is that geometric patterns serve as a kind of universal grammar, a structured system through which infinite creative expression manifests. Whether we're examining the quantum vacuum fluctuations that give rise to physical reality or the highest states of unitive consciousness described by spiritual adepts, the same geometric principles appear. This understanding resolves the apparent paradox between scientific materialism and spiritual insight. The mathematician sees in sacred geometry the elegant equations that describe physical systems, while the mystic perceives in the same patterns the visible expression of divine intelligence. Both are correct. They're simply describing different aspects of the same fundamental reality. Perhaps most profound is the realization that you, as consciousness, are not separate from these patterns. You are an embodied expression of them. When you contemplate a perfect geometric form, you're not merely observing it as something external. You're recognizing an aspect of your own deeper nature. This is why sacred geometric meditation can feel like remembering rather than learning. Because at some level, these patterns are already encoded within the structure of your awareness. In this light, the ancient temple inscriptions, the mathematical discoveries, the artistic expressions of sacred geometry across cultures aren't merely human inventions, they're humanity's progressive recognition of the patterns inherent in consciousness itself. They represent moments in our collective awakening to the geometric language that has been speaking us into existence all along. As our journey draws to a close, I extend to you a cosmic invitation to continue exploring the sacred geometric patterns that weave through all dimensions of existence. The insights we've shared today are not the end, but the beginning of a profound path of discovery that has no final destination, only ever-deepening revelation. When you leave this space and return to your daily life, look with fresh eyes at the world around you. See the sacred geometry that patterns the unfurling of a rose, the spiraling of galaxies, and the rhythmic waves of your own consciousness. Remember that you are not merely observing these patterns, you are an embodied expression of them. In your moments of deepest meditation or spontaneous wonder, when the boundaries between self and universe grow thin, pay attention to the geometric forms that may arise in your awareness. These aren't merely subjective visions, but glimpses of the actual architecture of consciousness as it structures itself into the multiplicity of creation. I invite you to join me next time as we explore the ancient mystery schools that preserved and transmitted this geometric wisdom through the ages. Until then, may you recognize in every perfect form, from the symmetry of a snowflake to the sacred proportions of your own body reflections, of the infinite geometric intelligence that dreams us all into being. Remember, the patterns are not merely out there. They are what you are. The 7 rays represent fundamental cosmic energies that shape human consciousness and development through distinct archetypal patterns, each carrying unique qualities that manifest in our personalities, souls, and spiritual evolution. These ancient esoteric principles find remarkable parallels in modern psychological frameworks, from Jung's archetypes to personality typologies, revealing a profound underlying pattern to human psychological development that transcends time and cultural boundaries. By understanding your unique ray constitution, particularly your soul ray and personality ray combination, you gain insight into your spiritual purpose, psychological tendencies, and evolutionary path, allowing for a more conscious participation in your own transformation and the collective evolution of humanity. Have you ever wondered why certain souls seem to vibrate with power and authority while others radiate compassion and wisdom? Why some individuals naturally gravitate toward intellectual pursuits while others find their calling in artistic expression? What if these differences aren't merely personality quirks or products of conditioning, but reflections of fundamental cosmic energies that have shaped your consciousness since the dawn of your soul's journey? There exists an ancient esoteric science, largely hidden from mainstream understanding, that maps the very architecture of consciousness itself. This wisdom tradition speaks of 7 fundamental rays of divine energy that emanate from the heart of creation, each carrying distinct qualities that shape not just human psychology, but all manifestation in our universe. What modern psychology has only begun to glimpse through concepts like archetypes and personality dimensions. Esoteric traditions have studied for millennia through the science of the 7 rays. All the most powerful ideas in history go back to archetypes, wrote Carl Jung. Yet, even he was touching only the surface of a much deeper cosmological framework that has been preserved in the mystery traditions. Today, we'll journey beyond that veil of ordinary understanding to explore how these 7 fundamental energies create the blueprint of your consciousness. Fellow traveler on the path of self-discovery, I invite you not as a casual viewer, but as a conscious soul momentarily clothed in physical form. A soul composed of specific ray energies that have shaped your journey across many lifetimes. The mystery schools have long taught that we are not merely physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. Your true identity extends far beyond your current personality, with its familiar patterns and tendencies. According to esoteric psychology, you possess both a soul ray that remains constant throughout all your incarnations, and a personality ray that shifts with each lifetime. This understanding offers a profound key to unlocking the purpose of your current incarnation. Alice Bailey, channeling the Tibetan master Dijwal Khul, revealed that each person has a soul ray that remains the same through all their incarnations, and a personality ray that is different for each incarnation. Think of your soul as a prism through which pure divine light flows, separating into these 7 distinct qualities that compose your unique spiritual signature. Tonight, I invite you to discover which rays most powerfully influence your consciousness, and how this knowledge can illuminate your evolutionary path. Our journey tonight will take us through ancient wisdom and modern insights, weaving together a comprehensive map of human consciousness that bridges esoteric tradition with psychological science. We'll explore how the seven rays, these fundamental streams of divine energy, have been understood across civilizations from India to Egypt, from ancient Greece to Tibet. We'll decode how each ray manifests specific virtues, challenges, and purposes, from the powerful will of the first ray to the ceremonial organization of the seventh. We'll discover how these rays correlate with Jung's archetypes of the collective unconscious, the Myers-Briggs personality dimensions, and developmental frameworks like Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. Most importantly, we'll explore practical methods to identify your own ray constitution, the specific combination of rays that influence your soul, personality, mind, emotions, and physical nature. This knowledge isn't merely theoretical. It offers profound insight into your spiritual purpose, psychological tendencies, relationships, and evolutionary challenges. As Alice Bailey wrote, understanding the rays enables us to arrive at a right understanding of ourselves as ensuing entities, and at a wiser comprehension of our fellow men. This comprehension allows us to cooperate more intelligently with the plan of evolution, participating consciously in our own transformation and the collective evolution of humanity. The concept of the seven rays extends far beyond any single spiritual tradition. These fundamental energies have been recognized across cultures and epochs, though often described in different symbolic languages. They appear in the Vedic tradition as the seven horses that draw the chariot of Surya, the sun god. They emerge in Egyptian mythology through Osiris, who, when he enters the ark or a solar boat, takes seven rays with him. In Theosophy, as Helena Blavatsky described, these rays are one of seven major types of light substance that compose the created universes. They represent the first differentiation of the divine triplicity, the one becoming the many through a sevenfold emanation of consciousness. As the Lucis Trust explains, the seven rays are the first differentiation of this divine triplicity. From three major rays, four minor rays unfold to reveal the sevenfold nature of divinity. This sevenfold pattern permeates our experience of reality, from the seven colors of the rainbow to the seven notes of a musical octave, from the 7 days of the week to the seven major chakras within the subtle body. Esoteric philosophy suggests this recurrent pattern isn't coincidental, but reflects a fundamental structure of reality itself. According to Alice Bailey, these rays divide everyone in the human race into the seven psychological types, creating a basic template for human consciousness. The concept spans beyond Eastern traditions. In Christian mysticism, they appear as the seven angels of the presence, while Kabbalistic wisdom correlates them with the seven lower Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. This remarkable cross-cultural consistency points to an underlying reality that transcends cultural conditioning. These are not merely symbolic constructs, but energetic realities that shape consciousness itself. Let us now explore each of the seven rays in turn, understanding their essential qualities and how they manifest within human consciousness. The first ray of will and power carries the dynamic force of divine purpose. Those strongly influenced by this ray exhibit qualities of leadership, courage, and decisiveness. Alice Bailey associates this ray with the color red, though other traditions link it with blue. First, ray individuals are natural pioneers and trailblazers, displaying remarkable strength of will and determination. At their best, they embody noble courage and selfless leadership. At their worst, they can become destructive, domineering, and ruthless. This ray corresponds with the throat chakra and reflects the divine aspect of will. The second ray of love wisdom carries the magnetic quality of divine love and unifying wisdom. Those under its influence display remarkable patience, compassion, and intuitive understanding. Associated with blue, or sometimes gold, in Bailey's system, second ray individuals naturally gravitate toward teaching, healing, and counseling roles. They possess an inclusive consciousness that seeks to unify and synthesize, though they may sometimes struggle with over-attachment and emotional sensitivity. This ray governs the heart chakra and reflects the divine aspect of love. The third ray of active intelligence manifests as the divine mind in action, abstract thought, philosophical inquiry, and creative adaptation. These individuals excel in strategic thinking, planning, and conceptual understanding. Their virtues include mental clarity and philosophical depth, while their challenges may involve overthinking or manipulation through intellectual means. This ray corresponds with the green color spectrum and governs activities requiring mental adaptability and abstract reasoning. The fourth ray of harmony through conflict creates beauty through resolving opposing forces. Those influenced by this ray are often artists, mediators, and psychologists who thrive in environments requiring balance between contrasting elements. They possess remarkable sensitivity to beauty and harmony, but may struggle with inner conflict and emotional turbulence. The fourth ray carries the yellow vibration and creates the bridge between the 3 higher and 3 lower rays. The fifth ray of concrete knowledge brings the precision of scientific thinking. These individuals excel in detailed analysis, technical mastery, and empirical investigation. Associated with the orange spectrum, fifth ray types make excellent researchers, technologists, and surgeons' roles, requiring exact observation and detailed knowledge. Their strength lies in their capacity for exact truth, though they may struggle with coldness or excessive criticism when underdeveloped. The sixth ray of devotion and idealism manifests as passionate dedication to ideals or causes. These souls display remarkable faith, enthusiasm, and one-pointed concentration. Often drawn to religious vocations, humanitarian work, or idealistic movements, they embody the devotional aspect of consciousness. Associated with the violet spectrum, sixth ray individuals can be inspiring leaders when balanced, though they may tend toward fanaticism or emotional reactivity when unbalanced. The seventh ray of ceremonial order brings divine order and organization into manifestation. Those influenced by this ray excel in creating efficient systems, ritualistic precision, and practical implementation. Associated with the indigo spectrum, these individuals naturally understand the relationship between energy and form, making them excellent organizers, ritual magicians, and transformative leaders. They bridge spirit and matter through the power of ordered manifestation. Each of us represents a unique combination of these 7 energies, with different rays governing our soul, personality, mind, emotions, and physical body. Your soul ray remains constant across incarnations, while your personality ray changes with each lifetime to provide different evolutionary experiences. What esoteric tradition has known for millennia, modern psychology has begun to discover through its own lens. The 7 rays framework finds remarkable parallels in various psychological models, suggesting that both esoteric wisdom and scientific inquiry are mapping the same underlying patterns of consciousness from different perspectives. Carl Jung's archetypes, those universal patterns within the collective unconscious, show striking correlations with ray energies. Jung wrote that all the most powerful ideas in history go back to archetypes, which he described as models of people, behaviors, and personalities that play a role in influencing human behavior. The first ray's qualities of divine will and power correlate with Jung's hero archetype, the courageous figure who transforms the world through decisive action. The second ray's nurturing wisdom resonates with the mother archetype in its positive aspects of compassion and protection. The third ray's abstract intelligence finds expression in the sage or magician archetypes, wielding knowledge and adaptability. The fourth ray's harmonizing qualities emerge through the lover and artist archetypes, constantly seeking beauty amid life's contrasts. The fifth ray's analytical precision appears in the scientist or analyst archetypes, dedicated to objective truth. The sixth ray's devotional nature manifests through the mystic or devotee archetypes, while the seventh ray's organizational talents emerge through the ruler or creator archetypes, bringing order to chaos. Similarly, we can observe correlations between the seven rays and Myers-Briggs personality dimensions. The search results mention that the way to determine a person's ray is through identifying MBTI personality types. For instance, INFJ types often display a personality on the sixth ray with a second ray soul, while INFP types frequently show a first-ray personality with a sixth-ray soul. These correlations suggest that modern personality frameworks are detecting the same underlying energetic patterns described in esoteric psychology, though through a different conceptual language. Even developmental psychology frameworks like Erickson's 8 stages show fascinating parallels with ray energies. Erickson's virtues that emerge from successfully navigating life stages: hope, will, purpose, competence, fidelity, love, care, and wisdom echo the virtues associated with ray development in esoteric psychology. These striking parallels suggest that both traditions are mapping the same territory of human consciousness and development, albeit through different lenses. How might you begin to identify your own ray constitution? While precise determination traditionally required the guidance of an initiated teacher, certain qualities and tendencies can offer clues to your predominant rays. Begin by contemplating your deepest motivations and life patterns. The first ray asks, "What is my will and purpose?" The second ray inquires, "How can I love and understand more deeply?" The third ray considers, "How can I think more clearly and adaptively?" The fourth ray wonders, "How can I create harmony from conflict?" The fifth ray questions, "What is the precise truth here?" The sixth ray asks, "What ideals am I devoted to?" And the seventh ray contemplates, "How can I bring divine order into manifestation?" Your soul ray often reveals itself through your highest aspirations and the qualities that emerge in your finest moments. What Alice Bailey called psychological insight into their soul's purpose. Your personality ray manifests through your habitual approaches to life's challenges and your characteristic way of engaging with the world. Your mental ray shows in your thinking style, your emotional ray in how you process feelings, and your physical ray in how you relate to your body and the material world. Consider which of these rays resonates most deeply with you. Do you naturally gravitate toward leadership positions, expressing the first ray's will and power? Or perhaps you're drawn to teaching and healing roles, manifesting the second ray's love wisdom. Maybe you excel in strategic thinking and philosophical inquiry, showing third ray intelligence. Your natural affinities often point toward your ray configuration. The true value of this knowledge lies not in labeling yourself, but in recognizing the divine energies working through you and how they can be more perfectly expressed. As Master Chokoku Sui noted, understanding the seven rays gives you the ability to see people as they are. By seeing people from different aspects, from different facets, your understanding deepens. This deeper understanding fosters compassion for yourself and others. recognizing that we're all expressions of divine energy working through different ray combinations. Your ray constitution isn't a limitation, but a unique expression of cosmic energy, your particular note in the grand symphony of creation. By understanding it, you can more consciously participate in your own development and contribute your distinct quality to humanity's evolution. From the perspective of esoteric psychology, human evolution isn't merely about individual development, but about the gradual unfoldment of these divine qualities within collective consciousness. Each historical epoch has been governed by particular ray influences, shaping civilizations and cultural movements. We're currently experiencing a significant transition as the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, which dominated the Piscean Age with its religious institutions and ideological movements, gradually gives way to the seventh ray of ceremonial order, associated with the dawning Aquarian Age. This shift explains much of our contemporary experience: the breakdown of old structures, the emergence of new organizing principles, and the growing recognition of the relationship between consciousness and manifestation. The esoteric tradition suggests that collectively, we're moving toward what Bailey called the externalization of the hierarchy, a time when the inner spiritual realities will become more apparent in outer life. This evolution isn't separate from your personal journey, but intimately connected with it. As you develop and express your ray qualities more perfectly, you contribute to humanity's collective evolution. From this transcendent perspective, the seven rays aren't merely psychological categories, but cosmic forces directing the evolution of consciousness throughout our solar system. Understanding them allows you to align more consciously with these evolutionary currents. As Bailey wrote, such knowledge is of inestimable value to the aspirant consciously preparing himself to become of planetary service. Each ray contributes an essential quality to our collective evolution. The first ray brings divine purpose and direction. The second ray provides cohesive love and wisdom. The third ray offers intelligent adaptation. The fourth ray creates harmony through resolving conflicts. The fifth ray brings precise knowledge and discrimination. The sixth ray provides devotional aspiration. And the seventh ray manifests divine order in material form. Together, these seven qualities create a complete expression of divine consciousness in human experience. As our journey draws to a close, I invite you to contemplate your unique ray signature, not as an abstract concept, but as living energies flowing through your consciousness in this very moment. These aren't merely theoretical constructs, but dynamic forces shaping your evolutionary journey across lifetimes. Remember that understanding your ray constitution isn't about confining yourself within a new label, but about recognizing the divine energies seeking expression through you. It's an invitation to conscious participation in your own unfoldment and in the greater evolution of human consciousness. When the first ray of will flows through you, express it with wisdom and compassion. When the second ray of love-wisdom illuminates your path, let it expand beyond personal attachment to universal love. When the third ray of active intelligence stimulates your mind, direct it towards service and the greater good. When the fourth ray of harmony brings both conflict and resolution, trust the beauty emerging through this process. When the fifth ray of knowledge awakens your analytical mind, let it serve the heart's wisdom. When the sixth ray of devotion inspires your idealism, ground it in practical action. And when the seventh ray of order reveals patterns and structures, use them to manifest higher consciousness in everyday life. As you leave this exploration, carry with you the understanding that you are, in essence, a unique configurations of divine light, the cosmic energies of creation focused through the prism of your consciousness. Your journey isn't separate from the universe's evolution, but an integral expression of it. In the words of Alice Bailey, this knowledge enables us to cooperate more intelligently with the plan of evolution. You're invited to become a conscious participant in this grand unfoldment. To know yourself as a soul expressing through specific ray energies and to contribute your unique quality to humanity's collective journey. The ancient Hermetic axiom tells us, as above, so below, as within, so without. The 7 rays that structure the cosmos are the same energies flowing through your consciousness. By knowing yourself more deeply through this esoteric psychology, you simultaneously glimpse the very architecture of creation itself. This is the profound invitation of the 7 rays. To recognize yourself as both a unique soul and an integral expression of the divine pattern that structures all existence.